I'm Emma, who usually lacks confidence in anything, and lately I've been feeling especially depressed. I have a younger sister named Charlotte, who is 2 years younger than me, and I have always been compared to her. Charlotte, unlike me, is blessed with good looks that people would say, "You're really sisters?" And I've also been subjected to some heartless words. It made me feel insecure about myself. What was even more painful was that even my parents treat Charlotte and me differently. For as long as I can remember, my mother, Olivia, would always say, "Charlotte has a really pretty face, right?" She always doted on Charlotte like that. I remember that my father, but especially my mother, loved me very much. Just because they were praising Charlotte, they didn't mean to put me down. But it hurt during my childhood to see her only being adored. I'm not pretty enough for them to love me. I've been so concerned that I once thought, now that I'm an adult, I don't beat myself up like that, but still, confidence remains a difficult thing for me to achieve. I don't begrudge my parents, but it's kind of sad that I'm not close with my parents, which is neither good nor bad. But I have only been back home a few times a year since I left home to get a job. My sister is still living at home and working part-time. I heard that she got a job once, but quit because of relationship problems. If my parents allow it, I'm fine with it. But just the other day, I got this call from Charlotte. "Sis, it's been a long time. I've forgotten what you look like because you haven't been coming home to our parents at all. By the way, I've decided to use your room. I threw away all the leftover stuff and everything." That's what it was about. "Oh, you threw it away?" I wanted to at least get a word in edgewise before I had some stuff I was going to pick up later, I replied. "It's bad enough that you didn't show up to get it all this time, right? I mean, none of them looked like they were worth anything, right? I was right to get rid of all that junk, and I got rid of the clothes and stuff too. I thought I'd get one that I could wear. Your taste in clothes is so bad, haha. So I doubt your sense of style." She made fun of me every single time like that. You dispose of someone's property without permission and not a single word of apology? I mean, if you're going to contact me like this, you could have said something to me before you threw it away, I replied in frustration. "I just happen to be free right now, so I called you. Don't get mad at me for such a small thing. Are you sure you're eating right? Haha. You're only wasting time on dieting because it will only make you irritated," she said without thinking about people's feelings. But Charlotte is always like this, and I'm already used to it, so I've given up. But when she makes fun of me, I get annoyed. And if she says something bad to me, I still get hurt. That's why I've been feeling depressed. I don't think the parents are aware of Charlotte's true nature. The thing is that she looks cute and she's good at making amends to our parents. Unlike me, she's very picky and our parents don't seem to mind. I used to envy her, but now I kind of feel a little sad for them. With that personality, it's no wonder she couldn't fit into society, even if our parents accept her. She also left the company due to relationship problems. I believe Charlotte's attitude is the root of all that. I wasn't as pretty or sweet as Charlotte, so I had to distract my parents with other things. It helped that I didn't hate studying. I managed to get into college on a scholarship, and now I work for a big company. I am enjoying living alone while sending money to my parents. I'm happy in my own way. However, Charlotte is still being taken care of by her parents, and I don't mean to put her down, but I'm afraid that if she keeps doing what she's doing, she's bound to get hurt someday. Maybe it's time for her to stop looking down at me. A few days later, I received the news of the death of my grandfather Scott, whom I loved very much. I regretted not seeing him lately. I have nothing but good memories about my grandfather. My grandfather noticed that my parents were only concerned about Charlotte. He was always pleasant and kind to me, never hurting me. So I could act like a child when I saw him. I'll attend the funeral the day after tomorrow, and I'm going to make sure I say goodbye. My parents and Charlotte are coming, of course, but I haven't seen them in a while, so I'm a little nervous. Charlotte is definitely going to say something, and I'm starting to feel overwhelmed thinking about that. Charlotte didn't like Grandpa, and if it were true, I'd prefer her not to come, but that's not possible. I just hope nothing goes wrong, because I want to mourn him in peace. And then Charlotte had a hell of a case. On the day of the funeral, I was on my way to the venue alone. When I arrived, my parents were already there. Charlotte wasn't. "Charlotte's not coming?" I asked my mother. "She was kind of taking her time getting ready and asked us to go ahead, so we did," she said. I would say that even at a funeral, she would come well dressed. Then it was time, and everyone was seated. Just as the funeral was about to begin, the door to the room opened. To my surprise, there stood Charlotte in a flamboyant pink mini dress. I was confused and in a cold sweat, and my parents were taken aback. Charlotte should have known that funerals are for mourning. There was no way the funeral could continue with the appearance of such a person. We paused, and my relative Grace became angry. "Hey, where do you think you are? What are you doing here dressed like that?" she said, pressing Charlotte for an answer. My parents were embarrassed and kept looking down, but Charlotte didn't care about that. "Oh, this dress? Isn't it cute? It's the last time I'm going to see my grandpa, so I dressed up and came to see him." I had never heard of this kind of reasoning. Surprised by that statement, our parents stood stuck on the floor, saying nothing to Charlotte. Instead, I rushed to Charlotte's side. "You go home and get changed right now," I told her. "Sis, you're usually sober, but when you wear mourning clothes, you're even more sober. Maybe Grandpa would want a prettier girl to mourn for him. I didn't like Grandpa that much, but I wonder if he's happy to have such a pretty girl here." He was not afraid to say that he was a good guy. Know your place. Don't make trouble for everyone with your ideas. I tried desperately to convince her otherwise. "I'm me no matter where I am, and I like to be the center of attention wherever I go. Sis, you're just pretending to have common sense like that, because I'm beautiful and you're jealous, haha." She said that without any hint of consideration. "What are you talking about? That's none of your business right now. You are free to think what you want, but this is a place to mourn our grandfather. You came all dressed up like that to get attention. Do you really think Grandpa is happy with you?" I scolded Charlotte frantically. Then Charlotte said, "I think I'd be delighted. I mean, Emma, you seem to think you were the most adored by our grandfather. He loved me too, you know. So, no matter how I dress up to come here, Grandpa will be glad I did." Charlotte didn't seem to listen to anything I had to say. I didn't know what to do anymore. Charlotte had no interest in listening to me. Seeing our exchange, my parents finally intervened. "Emma is right about this one. You need to come back dressed appropriately for the occasion. I'll go back home with you for now. Come on, let's go." My mother took Charlotte by the arm and tried to lead her out of the hall. But Charlotte refused to do so. "I don't want to have to go back and start all over again after I've gone to all this trouble of dressing up so nicely. Enough already. Let's just get this thing started. People make too much of a fuss over something as simple as what to wear," she said selfishly like a child. My face was almost burning with embarrassment. Just when I thought I was going to send off my grandfather quietly, my memories of him. Charlotte ruined everything, and I felt so bad for everyone else. Perhaps for once my parents felt the same way I did. Still, Charlotte did not want to leave. We argued at the door. Then Grace saw us. "If you don't listen to your family, even when they gently warn you, let me be the first to put it sternly. You get out of here right now. Not only are you dressed like that, but with your attitude, you have no right to mourn Scott." Charlotte was startled and froze when she saw Grace suddenly yell at her. "Even an empty-headed kid who comes to a funeral dressed like you can at least understand English, right? Then you understand what I'm saying, right? See? Now get out of here." Grace's strong tone seemed to make even Charlotte flinch. "But I don't want to leave," Charlotte protested in a quiet voice. "If you don't leave, the funeral will remain suspended like this. We all come here when we can, to mourn Scott, of course. And now, because of one person's actions, everyone here is in trouble. Do you understand that? I said, you don't belong here. All right, you go on home alone. You don't have to come back." Grace stared at Charlotte very intimidatingly and clearly stating the facts. Charlotte, who has never been yelled at by her parents, wound up like this for the first time in her life. She was overwhelmed and scared by Grace's strong tone and started crying with a frightened look on her face. You didn't have to get mad at me for showing up in a cute outfit." Hearing this, Grace was taken aback and said, "You're the only one who thinks she's pretty. You said you wanted attention, so do you like being looked at with cold stares? Then it's a great success, isn't it?" Then the others around us started laughing. Charlotte was shocked and embarrassed by the fact that she was being laughed at. She left the venue screaming and crying. I stood there in amazement. My parents left after Charlotte. I was thinking that maybe I should get out of there too. Grace then spoke to me. "You should stay here. Scott used to talk to me about you before he died. He says you were really devoted to your grandfather. You haven't seen him lately, have you? Give your final goodbye." All those words stopped where I was going. I decided to stay as Grace asked me to. I knew that if I didn't get to say goodbye to my grandfather because of Charlotte, I would regret it for the rest of my life. With that in mind, the funeral resumed without my parents and Charlotte. The three never returned until it was over. I was able to attend all the way to the end without worry. My parents left their own parents' funeral in the middle of the day. They regretted not going back after all. Actually, there's a follow-up to this story. After the funeral, I stopped by my parents' house. Charlotte and our parents had a big fight. I've never seen them scolding her so much before. "I've spoiled you too much in the past. I knew we had to get you straightened out at some point, but I never thought that at my father's funeral I would regret the way I raised you. You can only be cute when you're a child. From now on, be a grown-up and behave yourself." Such things were said, and Charlotte seemed upset rather than rebellious. "You never said that before. Why do you all blame me? And sis, don't just stand there and watch. Help me." She asked me for help, but I would never take your side. "I'll never forget the many times you've made fun of me. You've been a kid longer than most. It's time for you to be on your own." When I said this so strongly, Charlotte looked more frustrated than I had ever seen her before. "What? So it's okay for me to leave this house? Dad and Mom will miss me when I'm gone." Charlotte started to rebel. "Oh, that might work too. Let's give each other some space and look at ourselves. Isn't it about time you experienced living on your own? Find a job where you can work as an employee, not part-time, because I'm not going to help you." She was surprisingly cold like that. And I was surprised too, but I thought it was kind of nice. Charlotte again fled the house in tears. She doesn't have a place to go or money to spend, so I'm sure she'll be back soon. Our parents were willing to discipline her again, so I suppose that Charlotte's hell would not end when I returned. As for me, I've been relatively neglectful with you, but I'm glad you turned out so well. I'm sorry I've only spoiled Charlotte. My parents apologized to me. Frankly, I was troubled to hear them apologize for such a thing, but I told them it was okay. But I was kind of happy about it. I had a feeling that from now on, they would take good care of me. I had a bad experience at the funeral, but maybe it was not all a waste of time. I don't know how Charlotte will be rehabilitated, and whether she can be rehabilitated is a mystery. Still, I think I've at least reflected on the situation, so from now on, I hope she will become a more decent adult. We can't wait to see how Charlotte grows up without the help of our parents. Of course, I'm not going to help her, so I'm going to take it easy and let her see what happens. So that's the whole story of what happened at the funeral. I think my grandfather is watching over me in heaven. I feel like I'm more open with my parents than I used to be. I think I'll try to go back to my parents' house more often from now on.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me and began to speak. "There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only." Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. "I'm leaving." After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick! Is something wrong?" Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, "Yes. That's Nick for you." Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, "I'm very sorry." Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, "Get his boss here immediately." It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. "What is that idiot doing?" "All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next." Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. "If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you." I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. "Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize." Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. "What kind of training are you giving your subordinates?" Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed, I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry." Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." "Mike, what have you done?" Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.